Good morning, Father.
So nice to see you today. This Sunday, the readings speak to a different Christian message than perhaps is presented most Sundays, right? Messages of humility, of course, are scattered, are interspersed, but today is direct. And one of the refrains Jesus often uses, perhaps not in all discussions of humility, but in many, is, "Who do you say that I am?" And today I'd like to pose that question for you as you listen to what I have to share. Who do you say that I am? But I'm asking you to ask that of yourself. Who am I? Who are you? Who are you? You see, if you have watched the show called The Cosmos, please raise your hand if you've ever seen it. Not many, that's okay. Because the reason I bring that up is the humility that I think this show brings to us. Let me give you an example. I was reading an article from Science magazine, I think it's science.com magazine, that the average, this is the equation for life, okay? The average number of origin of life events for a given planet equals the number of building blocks on planet times one average mean number of building blocks needed per organism times availability of building blocks times probability of assembly times time. Raise your hand if you understood a quarter of that. Right now, I don't get most of it. And the Cosmos TV show shows me that I don't get most of it. The Cosmos TV show illustrates these beautiful images. The modern one is hosted by Neil deGrasse Tyson on Netflix. I do recommend it. But it shows these super mathematically improbable events, followed by another super mathematically improbable event, and so on and so forth, until we end up here today. Humility. That's what that gives me. Humility really means to understand that you're not as great as you think you are, or you're not as probable as you think you are, right? That we are an improbability, and for that we should equal greatness, or gratefulness rather. The improbability of existence brings us to a gratefulness for our existence. In other words, the improbability of you equals the improbability of me. That we are the same. That we are to love those who are the same as us, which is everybody really, even though we feel different. What Hindu religion calls the illusion of difference. We are to call the illusion of difference for what it is. To love you as you love me. To love myself as I love you. These are all equality statements, right? Mathematical phrases, equations that feel much easier to understand than the one that actually made you exist. And yet, the one that made you exist clearly has come to fruition, and yet these don't. These are the ones most easily violated. The one that says, I am equal to you, which is the case, that Jesus says is the case, and yet poverty still exists. Social sin is still perpetuated. Inequality reigns. And so, as we all understand, it was very difficult to understand the equation for existence, for life rather. Let's then think about the equation that is easy to understand walk with other people who are different, yet the same. I'd like to give you another mathematical improbability that doesn't really follow logic, something that Jesus clearly is talking about here today. You see, he says, do not invite those that can repay you. Invite those that can. And raise your hand if you use TikTok ever, or Facebook with TikTok videos, right? There's a very common sort of new thing that's out there that's permeating called manifesting, right? That if I give something out I want it to be, it will manifest. It will just happen. That's not really logical, and yet there is some sort of logic to it. I think if we boil it down, there's something more, right? It's not just if I want $1 million and I say it every day, it's going to appear. But there is some sort of logic in the illogic of saying that if I give positivity, if I give goodness, if I recognize the equation that you are equal to me, and that I am supposed to serve you as I would anyone else, that equation equals prosperity for me. It may not be financial prosperity, but I would wager that for every dollar you give to the poor, to the needy, to the sick, to the hungry, you will be returned 10,000 times over in greatness, in gratefulness, in humility, and in love and prosperity offered by God. Perhaps not financial prosperity. This isn't the gospel of wealth, right? That I'm gonna, for every dollar you give, you'll get $10 back. But this is the gospel of Jesus that says, for every dollar you give, God will return to you a bounty in heaven. For every dollar you store in your treasure in heaven in terms of gifts to those on earth who need it, you will be returned that investment 10 times over in heaven. That is the equality statement here. That's the equals statement here. That for what you do for others, God will always repay for you. Because what Jesus is saying, the equality, the equation that he's giving is, if you invite those that can repay you, your payment minus their repayment equals nothing left. But if you give to someone who cannot give back, the equation, the other end is God will restore that 10 times over in heaven. That is where our treasure should be stored. That's the illogic of giving. I'd like to speak a little bit about odds in giving, right? About something we have here at Holy Family. You know, these donation cards do enter you in a raffle to win. They do. And there is an equation there, right? 1 in 1,000 or whatever it is, how many ever cards you buy. But there's also an equation that transcends this raffle, that transcends giving, even just in the collection. It's the one we've already talked about, the one that makes us humble. We are humble when we acknowledge the illogic of giving, when we acknowledge the humanity in others. Returning to the Hindu example I gave earlier, how many of us have heard Namaste? Does anyone know what it actually means? It means the divine in me acknowledges the divine in you. It goes back to that illusion we were talking about. You see, the illusion of difference is counteracted by Namaste, by the divine in me seeing the divine in you. So let us today, as we move forward, responding to the question, who am I? Find the answer in, I am a humble person who acknowledges the improbability of existence, and yet sees the probability in the illogic of giving.